You can go to the next slide, Vera, where we'll start. We just want to welcome everyone, and please close all running applications to help maintain a stable audio and video connection. If your connection freezes, please exit GoToWebinar and then return to the session. You may enter questions in the question section of GoToWebinar at any time during the presentation. We will answer questions after the registration portion of the presentation and again after the mentorship section of the presentation. If we don't have time to answer all your questions, we will answer them after the webinar directly to the participants. So just know that if you put a question in the chat and we don't get to it, we will email you a response. All right, so I acknowledge the lands upon which CASLPO offices operate are traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. I acknowledge that Toronto, a Mohawk word meaning the land where trees stand in the water, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am thankful to the people who have since time immemorial cared for Turtle Island, which includes the land we now call Ontario. By acknowledging the traditional Indigenous territories and my relation in them, I have the opportunity to recognize the rights and history of Indigenous peoples. My acknowledgement is also a small way for us to dismantle the continuing impacts of colonialism and recognize the calls for truth and reconciliation. As you participate in today's webinar, I encourage you to reflect upon the history of the lands in which you are currently located. So I am Colleen Myrie, and I'm the Director of Registration Services at the college. We also have Cassandra, who can go ahead and introduce that.
I'm Cassandra. I'm the Manager of Mentorship and Audiology Practice Advisor with the college. Vera, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Vera Ibarra. I'm the Administrative Assistant for Registration Services.
And we also have online moderators. So we have Ira Davalos, who is behind the scenes, and we also have Bia. Bia, if you can introduce yourself as well.
Hi, thanks, Colleen. My name is Bia. I'm the DEI Project Coordinator at CASLPO, and I'll be helping moderate and handle some questions for you folks today.
So today's agenda will include 4 topics. We'll start with the importance of registration and licensure. What is CASLPO? Then we'll go to the importance of good character. And then we'll talk about becoming a CASLPO registrant, which will include information about the Canadian Entry to Practice exam, the application process, the registration process. And then we will go to mentorship and talk about CASLPO's mentorship program. So to start, we're talking about the importance of registration or licensure and what is CASLPO. So CASLPO is the College of Audiologists and Speech Language Pathologists of Ontario, and it is the regulatory body for audiologists and speech language pathologists in the province of Ontario. So CASLPO offers a number of services, one being registration. So we look at new applications, mentorships, and renewal services. We have quality assurance. So within that, there is the self-assessment tool, continuous learning activity credits, which are called CLACs, and peer assessment. We also have e-forums, webinars, other communications, and public awareness. And we also have a practice advice team for registrants, and we have our inquiries, reports, complaints, and disciplinary process. So what is CASLPO? In Ontario, you must be registered with CASLPO to legally practice audiology or speech-language pathology. So before you start work in these fields in Ontario, you must be registered with CASLPO, and you must have a CASLPO number. So to ensure public safety, the college sets a minimum requirement for individuals who are seeking to enter the professions of audiology and speech-language pathology. And this allows us, without this regulation or registration, the public would be vulnerable to unsafe and incompetent healthcare providers. So by registering with the college, audiologists and speech-language pathologists demonstrate that they have fulfilled the minimum set of qualifications necessary to practice in their fields. So the role of the regulatory body is to protect the public from harm by ensuring safe and competent practice, by setting minimum requirements for clinicians. By upholding professional standards, we establish and enforce clear guidelines for ethical practice and conduct, maintain quality of practice and continuing competence. We monitor the quality of professional practice and ensure registrants remain competent. And we also address any complaints by investigating public concerns and taking appropriate disciplinary action when necessary. So registration and licensure with CASLPO provides an individual with the legal authority to use the professional titles such as audiologist, speech-language pathologist, speech therapist, or any abbreviation or variation of these titles in Ontario. It also gives you the ability to make a representation to the public indicating that your qualifications to practice either audiology or speech-language pathology in Ontario. So throughout this presentation, we will be providing scenarios to illustrate some of the requirements for registration that we have. So our first scenario involves Mia, who recently completed her master's degree program in speech-language pathology at a university in Ontario, and she submitted her application to CASLPO, but has not yet been issued a license. So while waiting for her registration to be processed, Mia is offered a position at a private clinic that serves preschool children with language delays and begins working as support personnel under the supervision of the CASLPO SLP until her license is issued. So Mia assumes that because she has completed her degree and has applied to CASLPO, she can update her LinkedIn and Instagram bios to read pre-registered speech-language pathologist in Toronto working with children ages 2 to 6. Mia also begins using the following signature: Mia C, Masters of Science, SLP, pre-registered speech-language pathologist, and then an email, mia.slp@provider.com. So what happens next is a parent of one of Mia's clients visits CASLPO's website and cannot find Mia listed on the public register. They contact the college to inquire. The college sends Mia a cease and desist notice indicating that Mia has engaged in title infringement. According to the college's regulations, Mia cannot use the restricted title speech-language pathologist or any of its variations like pre-registered speech-language pathologist or any abbreviation of the restricted title like SLP. CASLPO takes title infringement very seriously. If the college finds that Mia has been using the protected title without being registered, her application may be sent to the registration committee of the college, which will look into her conduct and decide if she is able to practice in Ontario. So here are just some changes that could be made to Mia's LinkedIn and Instagram bios to be fine with the college. So instead of pre-registered speech language pathologist, if she had just put speech language pathology assistant in Toronto, that would be an appropriate substitute. And for the her education, instead of putting SLP, if she just indicates a Master of Science in Speech Language Pathology, that's fine. And again, you cannot use the title of speech language pathologist, so pre-registered speech language pathologist. She had just indicated she was a speech language pathology assistant. That would be fine. And again, in the email signature or address, if she should avoid the use of SLP in there. So to avoid any possible problems, it's important to follow the rules about using the restricted titles. So you should be aware of these rules, and they do not prohibit you from indicating your academic credentials on your resume or on your LinkedIn. It's just that you're not allowed to use the title of audiologist or speech language pathologist, but you can indicate that you have, say, an AUD or a Doctor of Audiology or a master's degree in speech language pathology or audiology. So that's fine. Just don't call yourself an audiologist yet. So the college has a document called the Standard Use of Restricted Titles that we encourage all applicants to review before applying for registration with the college, just to be clear on what's acceptable in terms of use of title. All right, so now we're going to talk about the importance of good character. What is good character? So for the college, good character is actually defined in our registration regulation in section 3. What it says is that an applicant's past and present conduct must afford reasonable grounds for the belief that the applicant does not have a physical or mental condition or disorder that may affect his or her ability to practice the profession in a safe manner, will practice the profession with decency, integrity, and honesty and in accordance with the law, and will display an appropriate professional attitude. So another scenario, we have Zola, who applied for a certificate of registration in speech language pathology, and after completing her application, she receives an email from CASLPO confirming that she is eligible for an initial certificate of registration pending the completion of the following steps. So she would have to complete and submit a signed registration form with a signed undertaking to take the CETP exam at the next available opportunity. And also she would have to pay the remaining registration fees. So to complete the registration process, Zola must also have an offer of employment to work as a SLP in Ontario and a mentor. So Zola receives an offer of employment and begins working as an SLP on December 9th, 2024, without completing the final steps for registration with CASLPO. On February 1st, 2025, the college receives a call from another SLP who wishes to check if Zola is registered with CASLPO. The college then receives the remaining paperwork from Zola. The college sends Zola a cease and desist notice indicating that Zola has engaged in title infringement. The college then receives a complaint from a parent of a child who was one of Zola's patients, and the parent wishes to file a complaint against Zola's supervisor, who is an SLP registered with CASLPO. So Zola's application is referred to CASLPO's registration committee for review to determine if Zola's conduct demonstrates a disregard for the law and the principles of decency, integrity, and honesty, and that members of the profession are expected to uphold. So it's always the responsibility of the applicant to ensure that they are following the rules. And it's important to keep in mind that before registration may trigger an inquiry into, misconduct before registration may trigger an inquiry into an applicant's suitability to practice. Each applicant would be assessed by the registration committee on a case-by-case basis, and the committee would want to know the details of the applicant's conduct before a decision may be made about the applicant's registration with the college. The applicant cannot practice while their application is under review, and the review process may take between 3 and 6 months to complete. I think a part of the Zola case that I don't think was entirely clear was that although she was working in a position that was a speech language pathology assistant, she was actually using the title of speech language pathologist and identifying herself as a speech language pathologist to other colleagues, and that's why another SLP checked to see whether or not she was registered with the college. In this case, the outcome was that Zola was required to complete a course in professionalism and ethics within 6 months of the issuance of her initial certificate, and she was responsible for paying the cost of this professionalism and ethics program. All right, so our next topic is about the Canadian Entry to Practice exams for audiology and speech language pathology. So for Canadian graduates, you actually have 2 options for how you may take the exam. You can either take it before you are issued an initial certificate of registration, or you can become registered as an initial registrant and take it during your mentorship period, your 6-month mentorship period. So if you do take the exam during your 6-month mentorship period, and if you fail it, then what happens is your initial certificate expires and you would not be able to reapply for your initial certificate until you had passed the CETP exam. The Speech, Language and Audiology Canada, SAC, is the Canadian association that administers the Canadian Entry to Practice exams for audiology and speech language pathology. So as the administrator of the exam, SAC will answer questions about the exam format, exam enrollment fees and dates, exam eligibility, the enrollment process, and any testing accommodations. They also provide a number of resources with respect to writing the exam, such as a document about writing competency-based exams. They have webcasts and handouts. They have practice exams and also study guides. So if you're looking for how to prepare for the exam, SAC is where you should be looking at. So for CASLPO registration, we require, of course, that you have a master's degree in audiology or speech language pathology. You must have good character, and you must also pass the CETP exam. The CETP exam is part of CASLPO's licensure process. However, passing the exam on its own is not does not permit an applicant to practice their profession. They have to complete the other parts of the CASLPO registration process. So our next section is about becoming a CASLPO registrant, and I will hand things over to Vera.
Thanks, Colleen. All right, so I will be discussing the application process. So there's 2 steps to registering with the college. There's the application and then the actual registration process. So where do you start? So to access the online application, you can go to CASLPO's website, and on top of the website, you can hover over the applicants tab and click on Canadian accredited programs. So it's helpful to read through the resources available in the website before starting your application to know more information, to gather information as well. And part of the requirements is proof of your eligibility to work in Canada. So this could be a Canadian passport, birth certificate, or citizenship card. So for non-citizens, you must provide a valid immigration document such as permanent resident card or work permit. So make sure these are scanned and uploaded as PDFs. So if you have not received your work permit or your postgraduate work permit, you may submit the work permit extension letter, which may be conditionally accepted provided you submit your work permit immediately once it is available. So after you've read all the resources on the website relating to the application process, you may proceed to access the online application link via the page for accredited Canadian programs. So when you scroll down to the page, you'll be able to see this button that says access the online application. So when you first access the application link, you'll see a prompt asking for an email address. So as an applicant, do not enter your email address here. Instead, click on the option that says apply to the college. So it's important to remember this because this will be the same link that you will be using for the registrant portal once you are fully registered with CASLPO. So you won't be able to access your application by logging in directly with your email. Instead, after you begin your application, you will receive a unique access link via email. So make sure you use that specific link each time you want to open your application. So we're going to walk through the portal itself, and you'll be able to see the different sections that you need to fill out. So for the first part, you will need to input your personal information, including date of birth, complete name, email address, as well as your profession. So just a couple of reminders. So you need to add CASLPO's domain, which is @caslpo.com, to your email services safe sender list. So this ensures that all communications from CASLPO will be received and will not go into your spam or junk folders. So the link to your application will also be sent through email. So make sure that @caslpo.com is added to the safe sender list. And so make sure again that the email address you use for your application does not contain an abbreviation of the protected titles mentioned earlier. So when you scroll down, you'll see these options, which shows the type of application category. So for your case, click on Canadian Accredited Program Graduate. So be sure to read through the information to ensure that you have the requirements and instructions on how to send them. For instance, transcripts must come directly from the university, or it may be sent through a secure electronic transcript system like Parchment or Micreds. And the letter from the program director is only required if your transcript does not indicate that your degree has been conferred. So we'll go through the sections now. So the first part is the identification. And under identification, there's this is where you will be uploading your proof of eligibility to work in Canada. So again, you can upload your birth certificate, Canadian passport, valid citizenship document, or a valid work permit, or your permanent resident card. Oops, sorry. So the next one is the contact information. So you'll be asked to enter your contact information, including your mailing address. So please keep in mind that the address you provide in your application will be the same address that CASLPO will use to mail your registration certificate once you become a general registrant. So you can update this in the future when you are registered through the registrant portal. But for now, make sure that the address you enter is current and accurate. So for the next one, it's the CETP section. So it will just ask you if you've taken the exam. And if you answer yes, enter the correct date that you took the exam and whether you passed or failed. So the next one is education. So you can click on the green button here with the plus sign, and this will allow you to add your education details. And once you've entered that, the information needed, you can click on the save button on the upper right corner as well. Right there. And the next one would be your education or practice recency. So this is where you indicate your professional practice experience, and clinical practicum is not counted as professional practice. So if you have been registered with other regulatory bodies in any profession, in any jurisdiction, you need to provide a verification of registration form, which can be downloaded as well in the application section. And you need to provide a verification of registration form for each registration. So the VOR has to be sent directly to CASLPO by the regulatory body, either by mail or email. And associations like SAC or ASHA are not considered as regulatory bodies, and so we do not need VOR from them. Next part is the conduct questionnaire. So you must answer all the conduct related questions with yes or no. And if you answer yes to any of the questions, you're required to provide further explanation in the text box that will be provided. And as you may have noticed, every section will have a declaration that you must select once you've completed that section. So for this final declaration, you will need to read carefully. Simply type your name, and then when you're ready, click on the green button that says, I confirm that I have read and understand the above declaration. A pop-up will ask if you are sure, and then you can click yes when you are. So once you've submitted your declaration, an online payment section will pop up, and an application fee of $150 will be due at the time you submit your application. So you can click on the green button to proceed to pay by credit card. So be sure to have your credit card ready at that time. So let's discuss the documents that need to be submitted with your application. So the following documents must be originals. They cannot be scanned, and they must be sent directly to the college by the governing body. So if it's your transcripts, it must be sent directly by your university. Again, it can be sent through mail or email. If it is through secure e-transcript platform like MyCreds or Parchment. And the letter from the program director as well should be an original document that also must be sent directly from the university. And the verification of registration, if applicable, must be sent directly to the college by the regulatory or licensing body. So again, they must be originals, university transcripts, and letter of completion. So they can be sent electronically in PDF format to registration@caslpo.com, or it can be sent by mail to our address, which is on the screen. So let's talk about the timeline and how long the process takes. So processing starts once your application is received, and it takes up to 15 days to complete the intake review. So you'll be notified by email about which documents have been received and which are still outstanding. So you will also be able to track your application through the unique application link that was sent when you created your application. So when you open that link, you'll be able to see which documents have been marked as received and which are still outstanding. So CASLPO must process application as fast as possible and in the order each application is received in a completed form as per the Office of the Fairness Commissioner of Ontario. So please do not call or email the college to find out your application status or to ask if we can expedite your application. So having to respond to these types of inquiries takes CASLPO staff away from processing and reviewing applications. And we cannot change the order of application, so it's best to wait for official updates by email. So we're going to go through a scenario as well. So Bashir wants to confirm that CASLPO received the email his university sent us the day before containing his letter of completion. Should Bashir contact the college to confirm that CASLPO has received this document? So the answer is no. So CASLPO will notify him within 15 days if the document has been received and if any still remain outstanding. So be sure to plan ahead, discuss CASLPO's timelines with potential employers, visit the CASLPO website to stay updated on timelines and fees, and remember that CASLPO maintains procedures that are transparent, impartial, objective, and fair, and does not offer any preferential treatment. So applications always get processed in the order in which we receive them. So I'll be handing it back to Colleen to discuss the registration process.
All right. So we are, after an application is reviewed, the next stage of the process is the registration process. So as I mentioned, it begins after it has been determined that the application process has been successful. You are eligible for registration, and then you would be contacted by our staff indicating that you are now eligible. However, you must complete the registration process in order to be issued a certificate of registration. So you will get a registration form from our program assistant, and that's the next stage. As part of the registration process, as an initial registrant, you must have an offer of employment in Ontario to work as an audiologist or a speech-language pathologist. And you must also have a eligible mentor lined up. So the registration form must be received by the college at least 2 weeks ahead of your employment start date. The mentor's name and registration number must be included on your registration form. And if you don't know your mentor's registration number, you can find it on CASLPO's public register. You also should confirm your status regarding the CETP exam at this point. It's important to indicate if you've already enrolled or written the CETP exam. And if you have not either enrolled or written the exam, you are required to sign an undertaking indicating that you will take the CETP exam during the 6-month term of your initial practice period. And also this undertaking indicates that you will stop practicing within 30 business days if you fail the CETP exam while holding an initial certificate. And just again, if you fail the exam, you can only reapply for CASLPO registration once you've passed the CETP exam. Your employment start date is something that we ask you to provide on your registration form. And if you are unsure of the exact start date, you can indicate as soon as CASLPO registration is issued on your form. And to ensure that your mentorship contract aligns with the issuance of your initial certificate, please submit your registration form no earlier than 3 weeks before your anticipated employment start date. This timeline helps to ensure that you can meet your mentor within the required 30-day period following the issuance of your certificate of registration. And also submitting the form too early may lead to a misalignment of the mentorship timelines and could cause unnecessary delays in the process. On your registration form, we also need to know your employment information. So this includes your practice location and your business telephone number. We also need to know your HR contact, their name and their email address. And as a registrant of the college, you're required to hold professional liability insurance coverage. So the amount of insurance, you have to have a minimum of $2 million per claim as the insurance coverage amount. And we will require you to provide the carrier name, the policy certificate number, and the expiry date. When completing your registration, the registration fee is $50. And you are also expected to pay a prorated annual fee payment. The annual fee is prorated quarterly for the registration year. Our registration year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So we have a fee chart that's available on our website that shows the prorated amount that is due whenever you are becoming registered. And once we've received all the required documents, it may take about 2 weeks to actually issue your certificate of registration. If any issues arise with your application during the application or the registration process before your certificate is issued, such as concerns about your character, say with title infringement or holding yourself out, you've started booking patients to provide speech language pathology services before registration. And if any of these issues arise during your application or registration process, please note that your application will be put on hold and referred to the college's registration panel for consideration. And of course, a review by the registration committee does extend the review process by about 3 to 6 months. So a final note about contact with the college. For confidentiality reasons, we cannot speak to anyone other than the applicant about their application without the applicant's permission. Therefore, the college cannot provide information about an application to a parent, a spouse, or an employer without the applicant's written permission. Misunderstood or distorted information by a third party could lead to delays or errors in your application. So we encourage you to contact the college directly if you have any questions. And another note is an applicant can start working as support personnel before a certificate of registration may be issued to them by the college. It's important for the applicant to remember that as a student's role in a clinical placement is not the same as the role of support personnel. So if you want to work as support personnel before getting your CASLPO registration, it's important for you to have a supervisor and who is either SLP or an audiologist, and you would have to follow the guidance provided by the college's position statement on the use of support personnel. So those are available on our website, and also your certificate of registration, as we said, will be issued within 2 weeks of us receiving your completed registration form. However, if any of the information on that form is either incomplete, it could also delay your registration. However, once we have received everything and everything is verified as complete, we will issue your CASLPO number, and as soon as we've issued your number, your registration will be visible on CASLPO's public register. And you can see on our website the Find a Speech Language Pathologist or Audiologist button. You can click on that, and congratulations, you now have your CASLPO number, and you may use the title and begin working as an audiologist or a speech language pathologist in Ontario. So we have a few important reminders for CASLPO registrants. So all CASLPO registrants are responsible for keeping their certificate of registration up to date. And a CASLPO certificate expires on September 30th every year. And all CASLPO registrants must renew their certificates on or before October 1st each year. So that includes newly registered initial registrants. So if you get registered with the college in either August or September, you are still required to renew your certificate by October 1st of that same year. So it's important to, just some takeaways from this first half of the presentation is that it's important for you to become registered, because registration ensures that only qualified professionals can practice, and do not start practicing before you are issued a CASLPO registration number. Good character is a foundational requirement for registration, and it helps to ensure that professionals act in the best interest of the public. These are just steps that you should do as you're becoming registered. One is read the application guide. The application guide includes some very important information that you need to better understand the requirements and the process for registration. When you start your application, you will be submitting the application online using our registrant portal. You will receive acknowledgements throughout the process. So within 15 days of submitting your application, you will receive an email confirming its receipt and also listing any missing documents if applicable. And also complete your application. College will review your application only after all the required documents have been submitted and the application is complete. So if you have any questions about the application process or requirements, please contact us at either Canadian_grad@caslpo.com or registration@caslpo.com. So we have any questions at this point? I guess we can ask Bia.
Hi, yes. So there's some folks who've submitted their questions. Thank you so much to those who did. Our first question is, are preceptors or students on placement allowed to use SLP student in documentation, for example, in assessment reports or follow-up notes? For example, if somebody writes, patient was seen by SLP and SLP student, is this acceptable? And if not, what is the alternative?
Well, the alternative, we say you shouldn't be using the abbreviation of the title. And so speech language pathology student is probably, it's fine. The SLP abbreviation is often what speech language pathologists use. So that's where the difference is.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope that answered your question to whoever submitted that. The next one is, on a job application, a question that folks often encounter is, are you eligible for registration with CASLPO? When can they say that they're officially eligible for registration? Is this after their final placement is finished and the school has submitted the final paperwork?
So it's to say that you're eligible for CASLPO registration is not something that you should probably do unless you actually have some paperwork from us indicating that you are eligible for CASLPO registration. So at the point that happens is once you've submitted your application and we've reviewed it, and you will get an email from us indicating that you are eligible for CASLPO registration pending completion of the registration process. Mm-hmm. So at that point, that would be the point where you are eligible. But before that, no, you shouldn't be saying that you're eligible.
Okay, thank you. So the next question we have is a question regarding international students who graduate from a Canadian program. After applying for PGWP, applicants may or may not receive, I believe this is workplace extension or WPEXT, that is the term they're using, as it's pretty random. According to IRCC, the PGWP submission confirmation letter can also be used as a proof of work eligibility. I would like to know if CASLPO is aware of this policy.
Vera, do you want to take that one?
Yes, so as mentioned earlier, if you don't have the work permit yet, because I know it takes some time for IRCC to send that, you will receive the work permit extension, and that's something that you can submit in place of the work permit. But once you receive the work permit, you must immediately upload that or send it to registration to update your proof of eligibility to work in Canada.
Okay, thank you so much, Vera. I think this is one that may also be for you. It says, what type of information goes in the education/practice recency section if we do not have, non-placement experience?
So for non-placement experience, Colleen, do you want to take this?
Sure.
Colleen, sorry.
Yeah, if you don't have experience, you would just indicate 0 as number of years, like it asks for your number of years experience. So if you just put that you have no experience in 0, then you can just move on. It's not a requirement for you to have experience to apply for the initial certificate. It's, however, those with experience could potentially apply for a general certificate. So typically new graduates, that's not something that you're eligible for. It would be, you just indicate that you don't have any experience and you'd be eligible for the initial certificate.
Okay, wonderful. I'm cognizant of time, so you can let me know maybe we have when we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. But the next one reads, to apply, do you need a valid work permit or can you apply and then provide this during the registration process?
Yes. So you can begin your application and then later on provide your proof of eligibility to work in Canada. So that's part of the conditions to be registered, not to apply.
Okay, wonderful.
So,
and then, sorry,
how
short on time?
How long is the bio break? Is it 10 minutes or?
I believe it was 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes. Okay, so let's go until around 6:55 if we have enough questions, and then we will have that bio break and come back
Okay.
at 7.
Sounds good. So let me pitch you the next one. Could you confirm whether we would be granted access to these Oh, well, that's one that I can answer. So the recording will be up on the website. So you folks are able to access this presentation and the very valuable information that our presenters are sharing afterwards.
Yeah,
So
and
the next one.
also
Yep.
upload the slides as well as the video presentation.
Perfect. Okay, moving on to the next one. If we have a start date for working with an initial registration, but the booking is open prior to the start date, is that allowed?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, that one is, and if you submitted this and you want to change up the wording, feel free. This one says, so they have a start date for working with an initial registration, but the booking is open prior to the start date. Is this allowed? And if you're unclear, we can ask
I guess
person who
if
questioned.
they mean that they are booking clients before they are their start date, they should not. So until they are registered, then they can start accepting bookings, but before then, no. So basically, it shouldn't happen that you have clients booked on the day that you are issued a certificate of registration. You aren't eligible to book clients until you're actually registered.
Okay. I hope that answered the question of whoever submitted, and if not, feel free to clarify and ask another one. I think we'll do maybe 2 more. So I guess the second to last will be, when can I submit my first application? Does it need to be after my last placement and once the university has completed my documentation? So not specifically for the registration for CASLPO, but for the initial application beforehand.
Yeah, so for the start of your application, you can start at any time. However, what happens is we don't start a review of your application until all of the documents are submitted. So, if you want to go on our website and start the application process, you can, but you can only get so far until after you've completed your program and your documents are prepared by the university and can be submitted. So there's no specific answer for when you can start, but you shouldn't expect just having started an application will put you ahead of the process. It's really when we receive everything, that's when we're able to proceed.
Okay, wonderful. And then the last one for you folks before the bio break will be, somebody entered, I've seen some places use the term intern instead of student. Is this acceptable?
Well, we don't, I guess what we would say is that once you've left your program, you're no longer a student. So it would be when you are using the term intern versus student. I think when you're a student and you're in a program, that's probably up to the university or the placement to determine what title you use in that situation. But once you've left your program and you are no longer a student, you shouldn't be calling yourself a student. Or, if you're not in an internship, you shouldn't be really calling yourself an intern.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that. Just a reminder to folks that we do have another question and answer session after the second part of this webinar. And if we don't get to your questions, we will return information to you via email. So thank you. I think it's time for the break now.
Welcome back, everybody. So we're going to move on to CASLPO's mentorship program, which has been in place since 1994 and serves as an important purpose related to the college's role and mandate. Mentorship is a condition of an initial certificate of registration. Initial registrants must successfully complete mentorship before they can become general registrants of the college. To protect the public, the college develops minimum practice standards that audiologists and speech-language pathologists in Ontario must meet. During mentorship, the mentor assesses the mentee's compliance with these minimum standards and ultimately decides whether to recommend mentees for a general certificate of registration based on understanding of and compliance with the college's standards. The mentorship period serves as an introduction to the requirements of the Quality Assurance Program, which all general registrants must participate in. Mentorships provides initial registrants with the support of an experienced colleague to ensure that they have the knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice safely. As regulated health professionals, mentees accept responsibility for their role in maintaining the public's confidence in the profession's ability to provide safe, quality, and ethical care by engaging in a career-long process of independent learning, self-reflection, and evaluation of their own competence. For anyone joining from the United States, CASLPO's mentorship program is not the same as the clinical fellowship year required for ASHA certification. After initial application, registrants are issued their CASLPO registration number and they receive the mentorship program guidelines via email. Mentees should discuss the guidelines and the details of the mentorship contract with their mentor. Mentees should use the mentorship contract form to guide this conversation. Once the details are filled into this form, it should be sent to the college. Please note that the mentorship contract must be submitted within 30 days of beginning one's employment. You should discuss your start date with your mentor, which must be on or after the date you receive your CASLPO registration number. The process and requirements for mentorship, the logistics of meeting with your mentor, methods of evaluation and feedback, and identification of a third party for conflict resolution are all elements outlined in the mentorship contract. The outcomes of these discussions should be documented in the mentorship contract and submitted to the college within 30 days of the start of your employment. There are 3 important deadlines in mentorship that mentees are responsible for meeting. You must submit your signed mentorship contract within 30 days of receiving your CASLPO registration number. The mentorship period doesn't start until CASLPO receives the contract. That is what allows the mentee and mentor access to the mentorship self-assessment tool, also known as the MSAT. In instances where mentees have neglected to submit a contract, any time spent in mentorship, patient care, or mentored guidance hours cannot be verified and therefore will not be counted. Once mentees gain access to the mentorship self-assessment tool by submitting their contract, the due dates for the midterm and final evaluations are listed and shared. Midterm evaluations are due 30 days after the midway, i.e. just after the 3-month point. Also after the point in mentorship, and final evaluations are due 30 days after the 6-month mentorship period has finished. This is to allow mentees and mentors enough time to fulfill the requirements for these evaluations, which will be discussed in the coming slides. Remember that as a regulated health professional, completing your mentorship and demonstrating that you meet the standards of the profession is your responsibility. As a general registrant, there will be important deadlines that occur annually and incur late fees if they are missed. During mentorship, the mentee must complete a minimum 6-month period of mentored guidance. Over this 6-month period, mentees must provide at least 500 hours of patient care, receive at least 48 hours of guidance from their mentor, and use the clinical reasoning tool with their mentor for case reviews. These are important in completing the midterm and final evaluations in the mentorship self-assessment tool. This slide provides a summary of the 6-month mentorship period. The first 3 months of mentorship focus on professional practice standards and indicators. The midterm evaluation is done at the halfway point. The midterm evaluation requirements will be discussed further on the next slide. In the second half of mentorship, mentees continue to evaluate how they are meeting the professional practice indicators, improve their awareness of applicable legislation and regulatory standards, and engage in independent learning to achieve the goals set at the midterm. In the final mentor report, the mentor confirms that you have completed at least 500 hours of patient care and received at least 48 hours of mentored guidance during the mentorship period. The mentor indicates if they recommend the mentee for a general certificate of registration with CASLPO based on observation of their practice and evidence that they meet the practice standards of the college. CASLPO will review the evaluation and your certificate will be changed to a general certificate upon confirmation that you've met all the requirements of the mentorship period. Midterm evaluations are due for submission in the mentorship self-assessment tool within 30 days of the halfway marker at 3 months. CASLPO provides this 30-day grace period to allow enough time for mentees and mentors to complete all the requirements of mentorship. For the midterm evaluation, this involves discussing the mentee's overall progress during the mentorship period to date, determining a rating for all of the indicators in each practice standard category, discussing and determining at least 3 learning goals and associated learning activities, reviewing 5 patient records, using the clinical reasoning tool with at least 2 patient cases, and submitting the midterm report in the mentorship self-assessment tool. Mentees must have completed their clinical reasoning tool for at least 2 cases, have completed at least 250 patient care hours, and received at least 24 hours of guidance from their mentor before the midterm evaluation is submitted. This amount of patient care time allows for sufficient practice, experience, and reflection on the mentee's progress towards meeting practice standards. At the final evaluation, mentors must discuss the mentee's overall progress during the mentorship period, determine a final rating of all the indicators in each practice standard category, review and approve the mentee's learning goals based on the learning activities that were completed, review 5 patient records using the checklist for chart review. If indicated at the midterm, they must also use the clinical reasoning tool to conduct additional clinical reasoning discussions, and finally submit the final mentor report in the MSAT, or Mentorship Self-Assessment tool. Mentees must also have completed the clinical reasoning tool with at least 2 additional cases, completed at least 500 hours of patient care, and 48 hours of mentored guidance is required by the end of the mentorship period. Please note that mentorship is not the same as supervision. During mentorship, you, as a registrant of the college and not your mentor, are accountable for your clinical work and decisions. Mentors are not supervisors, and mentorship is not supervised practice. What does it mean to be accountable for your practice? It means you are a professional who is expected and required to explain your actions and decisions. Professionalism is an attitude and personal philosophy demonstrated by a desire to always improve and learn, having sound knowledge of your scope of practice as well as the limitations of your knowledge, leading when you are able, doing your best, maintaining professional boundaries, and always putting your patients first. Professionalism is also a set of behaviors, including being responsible, reliable, courteous, respectful, and accountable. Let's consider the following scenario as an illustration of professionalism. Tanvi is an initial registrant of the college who works as an independent contractor. Tanvi is also told by a more experienced colleague that consent for assessment doesn't need to be documented in the patient record. This is incorrect. Consent for assessment must be documented according to CASLPO regulations and standards, as well as the Healthcare Consent Act. Regrettably, a complaint is filed to the college that involves Tanvi. During this investigation, patient records are reviewed, and it is confirmed that consent for assessment was not documented. Tanvi is asked to explain why they didn't document the consent, and their explanation is, I was told by a more experienced colleague that this wasn't required, so I trusted them and didn't question it. I didn't want to create tension in the workplace by asking this question. I was new and didn't realize this was wrong. Is Tanvi's justification reasonable? No. Being naive is not a defense. To reiterate, being accountable for your practice means you are a professional who is expected and required to explain your actions and decisions. For example, doing things correctly and adhering to standards even when it's difficult or might upset an employer if you raise questions. Regulated health professionals are expected to engage in self-reflection and evaluation of their practice. Principles of adult learning teach us that we are not always accurate or objective in evaluating ourselves, and that self-assessment is enhanced and more accurate with external input. This is the premise for peer assessment in the quality assurance and mentorship programs. Mentors fulfill the important role of providing objective input on how mentees are meeting minimum practice standards. A mentor's role is to provide guidance and to support mentees in reflection on their practice and application of professional practice standards. To improve mentees' competence, to measure it with their career stage. To apply principles of sound clinical reasoning. To observe and discuss mentees' practice with them in relation to standards. To provide general guidance around professional practice issues, and to submit reports of mentees' progress to the college. Mentors can have a great deal of influence on a mentee at this stage of their career. Mentorship is critical in assisting new audiologists and speech-language pathologists to form positive habits early in their practice. CASLPO relies on mentors to fulfill this important role to support our mandate of protecting the public. But it is also beneficial to the professions, employers, and the teams that we work within. Some direct observation of the mentee's practice is mandatory, but the college does not set a minimum requirement. The amount of direct observation is at the discretion of the mentor and needs to be sufficient to be able to determine if the mentee has the basic knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice competently and to evaluate whether they comply with CASLPO's practice standards. The mentor's assessment of need for the amount of direct observation will depend on their experience, skills, and competence, the risk of harm associated with the clinical activities, and the practice environment in which the mentee finds themselves. It is preferable that mentees spend consistent time with their mentors throughout mentorship. The college recommends mentored guidance be spread out over time and generally adhere to approximately 2 hours per week to reflect on how mentees are meeting standards in their clinical practice. The mentor must provide sufficient direct observation and guidance to be able to determine if the mentee has the basic knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice competently and to comment on whether they comply with CASLPO's practice standards. Direct guidance includes activities such as the examples listed here on this slide. The fundamental difference between direct and indirect guidance is if the patient is present. In direct guidance, the patient is present and all appropriate consents are obtained. including consent for the mentor to observe the session. In contrast, for indirect guidance activities, the patient is not present during guidance activities. You gain access to the mentorship self-assessment tool when your mentorship contract is approved, and you and your mentor will use the mentorship self-assessment tool to complete the activities listed on this slide. We're briefly going to review some of the screens that you will have access to when you have entered into the MSAT. When you log into the mentorship self-assessment tool, you will see important dates for your mentorship along the left-hand side. The timeline for mentorship is outlined here. There are also sections that highlight resources and guidance documents that can be used within the MSAT. Okay. The MSAT practice standards and indicators can be worked with leading up to the midterm, I apologize, and in an ongoing fashion until they are submitted with the final MSAT report. In this section, mentees will rate themselves on how they are meeting the standards, including their comments and uploaded evidence to support their evaluation. Uploading evidence to these sections helps mentors to have concrete examples of how the mentee believes they are meeting the standard. The mentor completes this section with their evaluation and comments. Because this section can be updated and edited up to the final MSAT submission, it is very important that both the mentor and mentee review their ratings, comments, and any uploaded evidence carefully prior to submitting. Mentees and mentors each determine how well the mentee meets the overall practice standards using the rating system for the 30 practice indicators. Mentors evaluate mentees based on a review of the comments and evidence mentees provide in the MSAT. The MSAT rating system uses 3 possible ratings, including meets the standard, needs work to meet the standard, or not applicable. Ratings should be based on the mentor's professional judgment, considering comments and evidence provided by the mentee in the MSAT. Mentors may also consider time spent with the mentee discussing and observing their clinical practice and providing guidance and feedback. Mentors and mentees should be honest and truthful when determining ratings on the indicators and standards of practice. The intention is that a rating of needs work to meet the standard identifies areas of practice where further learning is needed. The mentorship period is a time during which the mentee has maximum supports in place for independent practice and to enable their practice to meet minimum required standards of the college. It is not unusual for a mentor to assign a needs work rating to non-red flag indicators at the midterm. However, by the end of mentorship, mentees must aim to meet all the indicators and by extension, all the practice standards. So what are the standards of practice? They are minimum performance expectations that all audiologists and speech language pathologists practicing in Ontario should be exhibiting. The minimum performance expectations of CASLPO registrants are represented by the practice indicators listed in the MSAT. Shown here are 2 examples of the 30 indicators in the MSAT. First, indicator 1.2, I maintain records in a reasonable time that accurately reflect the services provided. And second, indicator 3.7, I use clinical reasoning at every phase of intervention. There are also practice-specific standard documents, like the provision of hearing aid services by audiologists, the dysphagia standards for SLPs, and consent standards for both audiologists and speech language pathologists. While the term standard is applied to the indicators and documents interchangeably, the key point is that they all describe minimum practice expectations for the profession. The MSAT outlines 5 professional practice standard categories for audiology and speech language pathology, each containing several behavioral indicators that reflect the overall standard. The first category is management practices. It contains 10 indicators. The second is clinical practice. It contains 6 indicators. The third is patient-centered practice, which contains 7 indicators. Then we have communication, which contains 5 indicators, and professional accountability, which contains 2 indicators. Of the 30 practice indicators, there are 9 red flag indicators that have been deemed to be higher risk if not met early in practice. These indicators must be prioritized at the midterm and are related to record keeping, related to the controlled act of prescribing a hearing aid for a hearing impaired person, related to health and safety procedures, related to obtaining consent, related to maintaining patient confidentiality, relating to clinical reasoning, relating to representation of one's professional credentials, and relating to professionalism. During mentorship, clinical reasoning is particularly important. To support development of clinical skills in this area, there are resources available on our website that provide guidance, including the clinical reasoning tool. Now that we've completed an overview of the importance and requirements in mentorship, as well as how evaluations are completed in the MSAT, we will provide some tips for ensuring a positive and beneficial mentorship experience. Approximately 220 to 230 initial registrants go through mentorship each year. The vast majority do very well because Ontario's audiologists and speech-language pathologists are very committed professionals. Some of the suggestions we will discuss relate to things that you can do when you are searching for a job and things to think about as you begin your mentorship period. The final section of this presentation will review answers to some of the questions we field frequently in mentorship. First, before you accept a job offer, take time to learn about the workplace or organization where you might be working. Clarifying information that is important so that you have a better idea of what to expect. Ask prospective employers what a typical workday looks like, whether they're experienced audiologists or speech-language pathologists on the team, what supports are available for new hires, and whether they have provided mentorship support in the past. For example, if you're considering working at a private practice, it may be helpful to ask how consistent your workload will be to determine whether or not you'll be able to get enough patient care hours for the mentorship period. It is also important to know whether your mentor will be physically present at the same site as you or not. Your first job experience can have an important impact on the development of your career. You want to be in an environment where there is professionalism and you feel confident that appropriate practices are in place. The college regulates audiologists and speech-language pathologists. It does not regulate employers or facilities where these professionals work. It's important to research organizations and the professions working there to ensure that they are reputable. We encourage you to use the public register on CASLPO's website to search for audiologists and speech-language pathologists. Ontario audiologists and speech-language pathologists are listed on the public register, as well as details of their registration history with the college. Consider whether you will be an independent contractor or an employer. You can negotiate or seek professional advice on contracts or verbal agreements before signing any employment contract. You must ensure that you can meet standards of practice and your professional obligations. During mentorship, you will be learning the standards, reflecting on how you meet them, and discussing this with your mentor. This happens in tandem with learning how to perform the expectations of your position. It's important to understand the process expected in your workplace for obtaining and documenting consent, and that they align with legislative and regulatory requirements. If applicable, make sure you understand the billing practices of the employer and that they adhere to the college's standards. Confirm that your information is only used for billing when you or someone you have supervised has provided the services, and that the billing system allows for an itemized invoice. Review the college's documents on record keeping and ensure that you understand the practices of the employing organization, including how clinical and financial records are stored and secured, and the procedures for release of information. Clarify whether you will be responsible for supervising support personnel and that you understand your professional obligations by reviewing CASLPO's documents on supervision of support personnel. Make sure the billing system allows for the name and job title of support personnel on invoices. Ask the employer about their infection control and prevention measures and ensure that you meet the standards for infection prevention and control. Make use of CASLPO resources, including contacting practice advisors who are available to help registrants meet their professional obligations. Their contact information can be found on CASLPO's website if you need further guidance on an inquiry specific to practice standards, position statements, or FAQs posted. If you have inquiries specific to your practice, they may also be discussed with an AUD or SLP supervisor or practice advisor. Finally, be clear and honest about the support you will need to practice to the best of your ability. Difficulties happen when expectations are unclear. Indicate if you need further training and/or support in a particular area and seek clarification if you're uncertain about anything. Remember that completing your mentorship and demonstrating that you meet the standards of the profession is your responsibility. Make the most of your mentorship by seeking peer support from your mentor and other colleagues, and approach your work with professionalism. Now to some common questions that we are asked in mentorship. First question: I work most of the time in a hospital, and that is where my mentor is. However, I also have a part-time job at a private practice clinic. Can I have more than one mentor? The answer is yes. You must have a primary mentor in the hospital setting and a secondary mentor in the private practice setting. Secondary mentors are expected to work with the primary mentor to ensure that all practice standards are being met across both locations. To reiterate, the registration regulation requires that you must be mentored in all of your practice locations. However, mentees can only have one designated or primary mentor to complete and submit the mentorship evaluations in the MSAT. This is who should be listed on your mentorship contract. If you will be working most of the time at the hospital, your mentor at the hospital should be your primary mentor. That person must be aware of the private practice work you are doing, but you will also need to arrange an eligible AUD or SLP at the other workplace who will work collaboratively with your primary mentor in supporting your mentorship period. Your secondary mentor will speak to your primary mentor about your practice so that they can accurately complete your mentorship evaluations before sending them to the college. The secondary AUD or SLP can also provide some of your 48 hours of mentored practice. This arrangement must be discussed in advance and be agreeable to all parties, and the college needs to be notified of this through the mentorship contract. Second question: can I change mentors in the middle of my mentorship? The answer is yes. It's possible to change mentors during your mentorship period. It's important to contact the college early if you realize this will happen so that we can assist with the transition. To change mentors, you must submit a new mentorship contract, which will enable your MSAT to be updated with your new mentor's information. A written statement from your first mentor may be required, depending on how far along you are in the mentorship period. If you know in advance that there is a possibility your mentor will go on leave, discuss whether it makes sense to start your mentorship with them at all. You may wish to identify someone at the beginning of your mentorship period who will be able to take over as your mentor when transition is needed. If you provide CASLPO with this information early in the process, it will allow us to identify and verify whether or not the additional proposed mentor meets the criteria to mentor at the beginning of your mentorship period. This is important to avoid possible disruptions to your mentorship period later on. Third question. I've not worked as many hours as I expected, and I'll not have 500 hours by the end of 6 months. Will I be able to get an extension? The answer is yes, it is possible, but you will need to submit a request. If you cannot complete mentorship within 6 months, you would follow the process outlined here to request an extension. Requests should be submitted to the college at least 30 days before the report due date or end of mentorship. CASLPO evaluates extension requests on an individual basis before they are approved, and you will receive an email confirmation if your extension has been granted. A final note on extending your mentorship period. According to the registration regulation, extensions may be granted for an additional period of no more than 18 months in total. The college does not have the authority to extend the mentorship period beyond a maximum of 24 months. CASLPO has many resources available to help support you in completing a successful mentorship period, and we encourage you to explore them on our website. Mentorship-specific resources on the website include the mentorship program guidelines, mentorship FAQs, mentor training modules, and CASLPO's mental health and wellness page. So, you've successfully completed your mentorship. What's next? A general certificate of registration with CASLPO will be issued to you when you have successfully completed your mentorship, passed the CETP exam, and if applicable, fulfilled any outstanding orders issued by the registration committee. To maintain your general CASLPO registration, you must provide a minimum of 750 hours of patient care or related work in the field of audiology or speech-language pathology during every 3-year cycle. This begins on the day that you're issued your general certificate. You will also need to meet the requirements of the Quality Assurance Program. The requirements of the Quality Assurance Program are similar to those that you have completed in the mentorship period. CASLPO's mentorship webpage, including the mentorship program guidelines in particular, contain comprehensive details on the requirements for mentorship. If you have any questions or need clarification after review of these resources, you can reach the mentorship team at mentorship@caslpo.com. And I'm going to open up the floor for questions.
Thank you, Cassandra. We have a lot of questions for you, so I'll jump right into it. So our first one asks, is the mentorship mandatory or is it optional?
No. Under Ontario Registration Regulation 2112, the mentorship period is a mandatory part of the initial practice certificate. You are required to practice with a mentor during the initial practice period, and for most that is a minimum of 6 months, but that may need to be extended if you cannot meet the requirements of mentorship. Without completing the mentorship period, you will not obtain a general certificate with the college.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to our next question that says, are we allowed to supervise CDA/support personnel during our mentorship?
During the mentorship period, you are expected to work within the full scope of practice, either as an OD or an SLP. That includes supervision of support personnel. There is a indicator in the MSAT specific to supervision of support personnel. And if you believe that you're going to be required to supervise SLPAs or CDAs or others, depending on the environment you work in, the title may be different. It's really recommended that you work with your mentor to understand the important aspects of supervision of these other individuals, and that you review the documents available on CASLPO's website about supervision of support personnel.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions actually talking about the nature of work that the hours that are required kind of entail. So folks are asking, when we talk about the 500 hours that are required for mentorship, do these need to be patient facing? For example, does report writing count?
So that one's a little bit more complicated. It depends on a few things. Primarily, we're looking for patient-facing work. You cannot count any patient-facing work done by somebody who is a support personnel or serving as support personnel if they are the only ones present. So there is that caveat. Generally speaking, what we're looking at in terms of your hours of accumulation is related to the number of hours that you're in the office doing patient-facing work, but also related work. So yes, charting can be counted towards those patient care hours. The minimum amount of time that is required is based on not a full-time position, but a part-time position. So if there are concerns that you're not going to meet the time requirements, I encourage you to reach out to mentorship@caslpo.com to discuss further and whether or not there would be a need to apply for an extension.
I would just add that we do have a definition of patient care that we have in our mentorship guidelines that you can refer to, and it includes all the activities that we would consider appropriate to fulfill those requirements.
Thank you for adding that, Colleen.
Thanks, Colleen and Sandra. So the next question asks, what is the earliest that we will be able to start working? For example, if I was offered a contract and mentorship in the school board, will I be able to start working and start my mentorship in September if I finish my program in July?
So yeah, I'm just going to capture the registration stuff and you can answer the registration.
No problem, Colleen.
So with respect to your registration and the timeline for that being issued, we publish timeline documents that outline the steps for how long the process will take. So what you should do is keep those timelines in mind as you set your expectations to when potentially you can start employment. And I'll just pass it on to Cassandra to add anything.
And I just wanted to add that once you have received your registration number, you can start basically immediately. So if you were to receive your registration number today, you could start your mentorship period tomorrow. And then we would need a copy of the mentor contract, or the mentorship contract, I should say, within 30 days.
Okay, wonderful. The next question asks, if you want to work part-time, would you complete the request for extended time to complete the mentorship, as Cassandra mentioned, or do you declare this at the start of the mentorship somehow?
So the mentorship contract, or the mentor's contract, I should say, is available and accessible on the CASLPO website. If you go to the website in the banner under registrants, there is an area that just says mentorship. Click on that and you can review the mentorship contract itself. It does ask what the number of practice hours you believe you will be obtaining on a weekly basis will be. And if there are concerns when this is submitted that you would not be able to achieve the minimum 250 hours by the midterm, you would get information from the mentorship team around the expectation to apply for an extension roughly 30 days prior to your midterm deadline.
Okay, perfect. And I actually think there was a question that says, I believe you may have answered this, but in case there's any more nuance you want to add, this person said, if I begin working in a part-time role and I know that I'm not going to reach 250 hours by its 3-month midway point, is there an extension request form for the midpoint specifically?
No, the mentorship extension form is a one form fits all, and what is listed on it and how you fill it out helps to determine what specifically needs to be extended. So if you're not going to achieve the 250 hours by the midterm, the extension that would be processed would be both for the midterm and the final date, as well as the final report submission date. This is because it will be assumed that you're also not going to be able to achieve that 500-hour requirement by the date that you were originally given for the end of your mentorship period.
Okay, I hope that answered your question to whoever submitted that. There's lots of mentorship questions here, but rest assured, Colleen and Vera, I'll get to your questions soon. The next one for you, Cassandra, is how do we record these mentorship hours? Is there a form to fill out for every day?
So we do not require that you submit an itemized number of patient care hours. You will be responsible for keeping track of that yourself. And I would refer you to the mentorship guidelines document to help better discuss that and get a better sense of how you might be able to do this. Again, if you go to CASLPO's website, on the banner at the top, hover over registrants and then over to the mentorship section, and the mentorship guidelines are readily available for you to review.
Okay, thank you. I think this is the last one for mentorship before I turn it over to registration and applications. This one says, can your mentor be located at a different site to where you are, but within the same setting? So for example, if there are no other SLPs located at your exact site.
Yes, this is possible. That there is an opportunity to work out how this would unfold when you go through the mentor contract with your mentor. There are cases in more rural communities, for example, where there may not be a experienced mentor accessible on site all the time. When you discuss how this will unfold, you need to be aware of things like how much direct observation needs to be happening based on your mentor's decisions and their availability and their schedule that needs to be worked in to your mentorship period. So if they have to take a day out of their clinic to come to your clinic to get a feel for how your practice is evolving at the very beginning, and maybe ramp down the amount of direct support direct presence that they need to have in the clinic, then that's something that you would need to work out. And then in the longer term, you also need to document how indirect mentorship will occur, whether that be through synchronous virtual review, meaning you have Zoom open or some other platform that the patient has consented to, and that the mentor on the other side is able to access and review. Or if you are taking recordings of patient-facing work that your mentor is subsequently reviewing. So there are definitely ways to accommodate having a mentor offsite. That being said, it's not encouraged. It is preferable wherever possible to have your primary mentor be on site where you are working.
Okay, perfect. That was such a detailed answer. Thank you. This one is for Colleen. This person has asked, can we apply for the cross-provincial practice license at the same time as we apply for our initial registration?
So cross-provincial practice applies to another jurisdiction. So if you are applying for a initial certificate in Ontario, usually the other jurisdiction wants you to be fully registered to get a cross-provincial practice certificate. So that would be, you would have to hold a general certificate in Ontario to get a cross-provincial certificate in either Alberta, Manitoba, what's the other provinces, Saskatchewan or New Brunswick. So after you've completed your mentorship, you can definitely get a cross-provincial practice certificate, but not during.
Okay, thank you, Colleen. The next question asks, hi, if I was a holder of a temporary license working under a registered CASLPO speech language pathologist, does this license authorize me to practice the full scope of an SLP, including for dysphagia management, for example?
So your initial certificate is, you are able to practice within the full scope of practice. So those areas of higher risk, you can definitely practice in those areas. I guess, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And just to clarify, because I did see some questions coming in about this. So for the temporary license versus like the initial license, are there any?
There is no temporary license.
Okay.
Initial, we don't have a separate temporary license.
Okay, wonderful. If you folks have any clarification that you need around that, please submit separate questions. And if we have time, I'll pitch those to Colleen. The next question is, before getting my registration number, I understand that we could work as an SLPA, but what is an SLPA, an SLP assistant exactly? And what's the difference between an SLP and an SLPA?
So I guess in terms of a support personnel, we have a document which we call use of support personnel. So generally speaking, there are various professions that could be deemed support personnel for a speech language pathologist or an audiologist, and those professions are unregulated. So there isn't a specific definition that I could provide that would capture what all support personnel do. However, you know what the scope of practice for speech language pathologists are and what they can do. And speech language pathologists and audiologists are who we regulate. And if you are support personnel, who gets hired for those roles and what the scope of them are really defined by the employer. Okay.
Okay. Wonderful, thank you. We're moving on to what I think might be the last question of the session. I encourage folks who have sent in their questions to check the links that were provided by my co-moderator, Ira, in the general chat. These are resources that will address a lot of the questions that folks are asking, and we highly encourage you to familiarize yourself with those. So with that being said, the next question is, once we get the initial certificate, can we sign for ADP?
Yes, well, the ADP process, I'll just have Cassandra answer that. She's the audiologist.
So technically, yes, as long as you have obtained ADP authorizer status. So the ADP program issues basically a separate number that allows you to sign off on ADP paperwork. It is unlikely, unless you take a bit of a gap after graduation, that your ADP authorizer status and number would come in basically in time for you to start employment on day one. It is a bit of a process, and you would have to look into what that application entails on the Ministry of Health website.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Colleen and Cassandra. I believe that was the last of our questions. If the presenters have anything else to add, feel free, but I think that'll close off our Q&A session.
Great. So Vera, could you go to the next slide? And so this is our last slide in which we just say thank you so much for joining us this evening with our presentation. And should you have any questions, you can contact us. This is the general email address for CASLPO, but we have several other points of contact. As I mentioned, there's that Canadian_grad at CASLPO.com. There's registration at CASLPO.com. There's also mentorship at CASLPO.com. So please direct your questions to us if you have any additional questions. And of course, please visit our website. We do have a lot of FAQs there that you can look at to answer additional questions. And of course, our documents there will probably answer a lot of your questions as well. We have an application guide as well as our mentorship guidelines, which provide a lot of information. So we also have a Facebook page, so you can join us on Facebook and YouTube as well. And just as a reminder, it will take us maybe a week or two to upload this presentation onto our website and the slides as well. But as soon as we do, we'll send everybody an email just to let you know that they're available. So again, thank you everyone for joining, and have a good evening.